Meeting of the Ledge Branch Subcommittee will come to order. Since it seems to be going okay so far and nobody has complained about the chair not doing opening remarks, we're going to stick with that proven formula. And I am going to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Espaillat, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Hayden, for coming here and for your colleagues being here as well today. The Library of Congress is a national treasure, and it has unparalleled resources. As you know, I appreciate your commitment to making it more accessible to every American across the country, and particularly to us here in Congress. Importantly, we look forward to the unveiling of the Visitors Experience Center in 2025. My team was able to take a peek at that, and they really bragged about it, and so we're looking forward for that. And as ranking member, I am committed to ensuring that the library has the resources that it needs to continue its mission, safeguard its collection, and provide a robust cybersecurity protection for all of us. So I would also like to thank and recognize the staff of the Congressional Research Service, especially the Appropriations team and Executive Branch Operations section, for their continuous support and essential support to our entire committee. So I look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Dr. Hayden.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. I would like to thank our witness for being here, the Librarian of Congress. Ms. Strong is also here representing Ms. Shira Perlmutter for the Copyright Office, and Dr. Mazanek is here representing the Congressional Research Service. Ms. Perlmutter and Dr. Mazanek's testimony have been submitted for the record, and I now recognize you, Dr. Hayden, for your summary of your written testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Nominated Ranking Member Espaillat and members of the subcommittee for this opportunity to provide testimony in support of the library's 2024 budget.
Okay.
Well, I thanked you, Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the subcommittee, and I was thanking you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of the library's fiscal 2024 budget. And I'm pleased to report that in fiscal 22, the library returned to regular operations. Visitors and researchers returned on site. The reading rooms reopened and in-person events multiplied, while our very popular virtual programming continued. And with the support of Congress, the library continued to build collections in multiple formats and engage users in a variety of ways. Today, the physical collections contain nearly 175 million items, and many of those are in digital form, and the library's digital engagement increased dramatically since 2020. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude for the support from this committee and Congress in general for investing in our recent IT structure. Also, the Visitor Experience Initiative. We've raised over almost, and you see I'm ready to go there, we've raised almost $20 million from donors nationwide for this impactful initiative, and our goal is to have engaging new spaces in the Thomas Jefferson Building open to the public for the nation's 250-year celebration in 2026. I come before you today to discuss the Library of Congress's appropriations request for $940.8 million, a 7.5% increase over the fiscal 2023 enacted appropriation. This request includes $45.8 million in mandatory pay and price level increases, and the remaining increases represent critical investments necessary to meet the library's mission. With modern IT infrastructure in place, thanks to your support, we are using a continuous development approach to ensure improvements as we manage all of the library's technology, and our requests build on that. For instance, resources for congress.gov to build capacity to continue to serve Congress effectively. The U.S. Copyright Office has reached major milestones toward a new Enterprise Copyright System, ECS, which is transforming the entire copyright process. And the budget request this year as for a permanent base for continuing to develop the ECS. The library's special responsibility to the National Library for the Blind and Print Disabled extends to critical IT systems that ensure accessibility for its patrons and blind staff. The request this year includes staffing dedicated to continuous innovation and development of these systems. Other forms would replace very obsolete talking book machines with web-based systems and make refreshable Braille e-readers available to patrons. In addition, we have a request for support for the increasing volume and complexity of the contracts that support the growing IT structure that we have. And that would mean additional experienced staff for the library's contracts and grants directorate. Other requests would ensure more responsibility and for the service to Congress. And with the significant increase in the volume and complexity of bills introduced, the CRS, Congressional Research Service, requests additional staff to accommodate the growing bill digest workload and to enhance its support for Congress. There's also a request for a pilot program for quantitative analysis of research and operational big data to meet emerging congressional demand. We recognize the challenges that result from the current fiscal environment, and we know that our programmatic requests this year represent the most necessary and impactful priorities that will enhance our ability to serve Congress and the American people. So thank you for your support, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. And Dr. Hayden's written testimony will be part of our record, as well as the stuff that I've indicated before. And so the chair now recognizes for questions the representative from the Bronx, Mr. Espaillat.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, we went from the Empire State to the Big Apple to the Boogie Down Bronx. Thank you for the opportunity. Dr. Hayden, I know that all of us really enjoy the library, and I wanted to get your impression on how you feel the services that you provide will be compromised if the discretionary spending cuts come through, and what will be the impact on the work that you do there?
There is no aspect of the library's work and the people we serve that would not be affected by reductions in resources. And because the library is roughly 65% pay, and the non-pay is used for all the majority of the modernization efforts, some that I referred to just a minute ago. The support to Congress specifically, as well as the people it serves, would be dramatic depending on the reduction. For instance, we would, depending on the size of a reduction, we would immediately implement a year-long hiring freeze and not backfill positions from attrition, which would then make our FTE count go down, and you'd have fewer people doing more work. We would have to mandate, for instance, furlough days, and that would have a real effect on our ability to provide timely service to Congress. So CRS is 85 to 90% pay their people. So when you cut CRS, you are cutting direct service to Congress. Then copyright registrations, we made great strides. We talked about the milestones, but the work on the new copyright system that our public stakeholders are very interested in. That's why our register is actually in California at a Copyright in California conference, where they're urging us to continue. That work would stop. Our other IT systems, the National Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, the rollout of the e-readers would continue. We circulate about 22 million items to the blind and print disabled each year. And when you think about the impact on that community, people who are really dependent on our services throughout the country, I can go on with the cataloging of the materials that we provide for thousands of libraries throughout the country. Digitizing the collection, our security and IT development would be compromised, and that's one we'd have to make sure that we preserve, because cybersecurity is so important, so we have to maintain that. And then, of course, we would have to reduce the public services, the on-site services in those reading rooms. So some would close, reduced hours, and then things like our signature programming and those things would have to be halted. So it's a degradation of services right when we're coming out of really renewing what the library had to endure in previous years. So it would
And you
quite
mentioned
affect.
cybersecurity, and that's so important to all of us. In fact, the Library of Congress experienced more than 180,000 attempted cyber attacks in a year. What is the library doing to handle that? What are you proposing
Well,
to do?
thank you for mentioning that, because we are a target, and we know that, and we take it very seriously, and we have a very robust security system, and we're very fortunate to have a CIO, Judith Conklin, who's here, who is a cybersecurity expert, and who could, if you wouldn't mind, give you even more in-depth, because there are certain things we can say publicly. But
20
Judith
seconds,
is that, and just as she comes up, she's receiving in a couple of weeks her second award for public service, specifically for what she does with cybersecurity and making sure our systems
Thank you, Dr.
are
Hayden.
not
Ms.
attacked.
Conklin, could I have you just hang on for a minute? I wanted to make Mr. Franklin aware before you started
sorry.
testifying. She is a former Army officer, so I would expect you would be open-minded based on your military background. Anything she would have to say, please proceed.
She was a major, I understand.
But Army. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your concern about cybersecurity at the Library of Congress. Cybersecurity is a passion of mine, and it's a top priority for me as the CIO. The cybersecurity program at the Library of Congress really took off in 2002, and it was built in a non-centralized way, and it was down, the specialists were down in the businesses. When, as you know, in 2015, technology needed to be revamped in our agency, and Dr. Hayden arrived in 2016, and she directed centralization. We centralized the cybersecurity roles, and that's strengthened it significantly. So we have cybersecurity professionals under our Chief Information Security Officer. We have an authorizing official, Steve Elke, that started building it in 2002, and he's very, very well knowledgeable in IT security, and he only allows things on the production network. It takes his signature to do that. Our CISO, Sean Lang, is very technical and works with the legislative branch CISOs also. From a tools perspective, we are always vigilant. We're always monitoring the network, monitoring our assets, monitoring folks coming in or attempting to come in. We have a 24-hour virtual SOC, Security Operations Center, and we have been very lucky to receive support from Congress since 2015 on our IT security initiatives, and that has helped us strengthen the security program. So I feel very strong that we are very mature in our IT security program, but we continue to mature because of the cyber threats in the world continue to evolve.
Thank you.
If I would also add that we have added additional funding to have additional background checks for certain staff members, even the ones that are physically around some of our equipment. So we've stepped that up too, and so that's increased in our budget.
Gentleman from Kansas, you are recognized. The floor is yours, Mr. LeTurner.
Dr. Hayden, I wanted to ask about the trend line. The digital engagement increased dramatically since the start of the pandemic. Have you seen that trend continue this year?
Yes, we have. And what is very interesting, at certain points when we post something or we have a special something to put out, like when we had a pop star that used one of our historic flutes, we saw a dramatic uptick, and we were able to see that quite a few people were looking and saying, what else does the Library of Congress have? And so it helped quite a bit. Because then they're saying all of this, and then they look and they say, oh, you have a digital jukebox, or you have old movies, you have photographs, you have maps, you have this, you have that, and people start exploring what we call our digital front door, our website. And so to see that increase and to see it being sustained is very rewarding.
Talk about a little bit the funds to improve IT contracting.
We find, and we're not alone, that the attrition rate for contractors, people who can work in contracting, is rather high. For the library in general, it averages about 7 to 8% attrition. In that area in contracts, it's about 25%. And we share the difficulty with other agencies that those people are very highly sought after. And so we have to do more to recruit them, but also to make sure that we maintain staff there.
Talk a little bit about the plan to develop congress.gov. What does that look like?
Well, you have Mary Mazanek here, but we had, but before she starts, I want to know that in terms of impact and budget impact, that would be a system that would be impacted, because right now, for instance, we're able to have every 3 weeks new improvements to congress.gov. There's continuous improvement in doing that. So we're on track for that. We've been funded for that, and it's vital to the work.
So Congress.gov is also the repository of the bill summaries. And one of the concerns that have been raised is the timeliness of the bill summaries. And if you compare the number of measures introduced from the 115th to the 117th, there has been a 30% increase, and the bills are more complex. So the programmatic increase that we have requested would fund 12 additional slots that would increase the size of the team that does bill summaries by a third, and it would hopefully improve the timeliness of bill summaries by 40%. We are also requesting 4 additional FTEs to help support continuous upgrades and improvement to Congress.gov. Congress.gov is a joint effort between CRS and other parts of the library. Also, the Clerk of the House and the Secretary of the Senate, they are also partners in this effort. And so we are constantly trying to introduce new features to Congress.gov that you find useful.
Sure, I appreciate that. And I see your name, Go Irish. And I yield back, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau for that. And the chair now recognizes the gentleman from the Sunshine State, Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Hayden. I appreciate learning about your organization. I've always been a fan of it, and like everything I've experienced around here, there's a lot more to it under the hood as I start diving in. I guess I'm curious to know on the personnel side, because so many of the entities that fall under Ledge Branch are people-driven. That's where the source of the budget primarily lies. How has telework evolved within your organization pre-pandemic, and then and now that we've come back out of that, are you seeing some permanent changes? And are there what would you consider some of the benefits, and are there challenges, say culturally or transitioning knowledge as we hear from most branches? We're seeing a brain drain in a lot of areas as people retire from the workforce. How do we transition that knowledge to the next generations, and what challenges do you see when folks aren't always face to face?
Our post-pandemic telework policy was redesigned to make sure that we have our mission stable, to serve Congress and the public. And then also, though, to provide the flexibilities that we really got a chance to see during the pandemic. And what we know and the way we have revised the policy is that there are going to be differences based on the unit. For instance, you have CRS, very direct service intensive. The reading rooms, people coming in, there are different units that had to look at their own policies. And there are requirements now that we have, or there's a minimum of on-site, regardless. And then there are opportunities for more telework based on what the position is. For instance, IT. They could do different types of things. So it's not it depends on the type of service that's being provided, but we made sure that we had some flexibilities, and we learned what those are, but we also wanted to make sure that we maintain a certain level of service. And so those checks and balances are in there with that.
Okay. Do you, I would think within your realm, being associated with the Library of Congress would be like the World Series, or, everyone would want to be affiliated with the organization. It would make your staff very enticing to folks elsewhere. I mean, I would think having experience with the Library of Congress would look very good on a resume. Do you find yourself, are you poached a lot from universities and other entities trying to hire away your people? And do you have a salary structure that's competitive to keep your best?
What the Library of Congress has, and I'm speaking as a career librarian, is that it's almost like you're going to the top, all right? And it is the nation's library in that. So you have that, even though sometimes the salaries might not be as competitive with universities and colleges, and then in other areas, for instance, IT, you have to look at that. So we have interesting projects that people could get involved with, but that also gives you a more of a turnover, possibly people get the experience at the Library of Congress, and then industry might take them away. So we try to keep staff members engaged and to make sure that we at least, and that's when we think about the telework policy, for instance, some flexibilities. Before the pandemic, it was rather rigid. You had to do, so we look at our HR policies in terms of being attractive, not just for the status, but the fact that people, Washington, D.C., physically living in this area is sometimes a challenge.
Well, I thank you that you brought the dinner series back. I'm looking forward to participating in those. And as I came in last session as a freshman, I was told really across the board that of all the events and things you can go to in D.C., those speaker series, the dinners are one of the best things in Washington. So glad to see we're put that part of the pandemic behind us. But I don't have any other questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. You should know they also have a lunch series, which you don't have to pass an entrance exam for. It's just in the cafeteria every day at noon. That's the one I've been able to go to, but not with a lot of frequency. But they're working on lowering the standards for the other one. I appreciate that, Dr. Hayden. Gentleman from the Peach State, Mr. Clyde, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Ladies, thank you for being here. Ms. Hayden, the offsetting collections that are reported here for fiscal year 2022, I believe that's about almost $45 million. That would be on summary tables. How do you handle that? As in, are those collections then used for the next year's budget, or do they decrease the appropriation for the current year?
They are, my understanding is they are in copyright,
Okay.
and that is an area that, and you might want to speak to that. Ms. Strong is here.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden. Yes, so the Copyright Office is funded in two ways, by appropriated dollars from Congress, as well as offsetting collections, which are the payments and fees that we collect for some of our services. And so we are not a fully fee-funded agency,
Right.
but the offsetting collections are those fees that we generate from that. And so that does pay for part of the Copyright Office basic budget.
Okay, but the question was, what fiscal year? The year that you collect them, are they used the year that you collect them, or are they the next year?
My understanding is we definitely try to use it the years that collect. We do have a very small prior year fund of, I believe, $1 million, which we can use to go back to a prior year that will go to the next year. So we do have a very small fund to use to fund the next year's event. But
Okay.
primarily, we aim to execute in that fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. I went back and looked at your 2019 budget, which was about $696 million. And then if you look at offsetting collections projected for fiscal year 24 at $45.5 million, that would be a total appropriation of almost $42 million. Would you be able to make the Library of Congress work efficiently with that kind of an appropriation for fiscal year 24?
You're referring to the 2019?
I am. The pre-COVID,
It would be very difficult.
okay? Could you do it?
When you say operate, it would be at a reduced services, reduced everything. For the public, for Congress,
Okay.
which is our primary goal, we're the Library of Congress, so CRS would be severely damaged because they are 90% personnel and people. So services to Congress and the people Congress serves would be severely affected.
So the current ask is $895 million. This year's enacted was $828.5 million. And this would be then 742, so about $75 million less than what you're currently getting. About $750 million.
And I just want to clarify
Sure.
what you're asking in terms of the effect on services to Congress and the public.
Sure. Why not?
There would be service cuts.
Okay. All right. To Director Mazanek, you spent about an entire page of your 8-page testimony, I believe, on talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion training. How much money do you actually spend on that annually?
I don't have that figure in my head. We can certainly calculate that and get it back to you. We try to do quarterly trainings for the staff and for managers on diversity and inclusion topics. It is a priority of mine to recruit recruit and retain a diverse workforce and have a very inclusive work environment. But I can get back to you with a specific figure.
Okay, I understand you have a website dedicated to it,
We recently.
And newsletter, et cetera?
Introduced a website that has all the information on. I wouldn't call it a newsletter. There's on-site information that staff can look at. We've expanded our efforts to participate in recruitment events. We did 30 last year. We've done 8 this year to try to reach populations that are not routinely represented in the federal workforce. So and I think it has had an impact at the senior level, which I am involved in selecting people. Since 2020, we've had 8 senior level hires, senior level managers. 5 have added diversity. So we are making an impact.
I only use the term newsletter because you used it in your testimony here, that's all. Okay, I yield back.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, Dr. Hayden, we learned something this morning in the GAO hearing that I would encourage you folks to do if it's appropriate, and that is to supplement your testimony, because we all know that we're in a challenging fiscal environment. As you go through your presentation, if there are areas where you go, hey, here's where here's the value that we're providing, so that when we look to make the decisions that will inevitably have to be made, I think part of the consideration needs to be, where's the value? Now, that may be a hard thing to quantify, and if you can't, you can't. But I want to encourage you so that all committee members can see. It's like, so here's what we're asking for, and here's what we've done programmatically. But to try to reduce that to by the way, here's the value that we're providing for the dollars that you're spending on us. If you can quantify that somehow, we would certainly encourage you to do that to supplement it. And we're not picking on you guys. We're going to ask everybody, hey, where's the value here, so that when those decisions are made, it's not just where do we start and how do we get to where we need to get, so that if there are cuts, not that you wouldn't have the discretion to see how you implement those, but we want to be as well informed as possible. So I put that out there for you.
Thank you.
And with that, since there are no other questions or whatever, the members have 10 days. I'm making that up, so don't look for the rule. 10 days to submit additional questions on behalf of committee members, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.